The air hung heavy, thick with the scent of lilies and impending rain. Olivia stood by the grand fireplace, the flames casting dancing shadows across the room, mirroring the turmoil in her own heart. Her husband, Mark, was away on business, leaving her alone in this sprawling house with his father, Edward, a man she'd always admired, respected, maybe even... No, she pushed the thought away, guilt washing over her. It was wrong, unthinkable, and yet the air crackled with an unspoken tension, a forbidden current that seemed to flow between them. Olivia nervously smoothed down her dress, the silk feeling suddenly too intimate. The silence in the room was deafening, punctuated only by the crackling fire. She could feel Edward's gaze on her, heavy and lingering. He was a handsome man, even in his late 50s, with a rugged charm that belied his years. Dinner had been a strained affair. Forced conversation, polite smiles that didn't reach their eyes. Olivia had tried to focus on her food, but every clink of silverware, every stolen glance across the table amplified the tension. Edward's voice, deep and resonant, sent shivers down her spine. She excused herself early, pleading a headache. In truth, it was her heart that pounded against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat of fear and excitement. Retiring to the library, she tried to lose herself in a book, but the words swam before her eyes. The scent of Edward's pipe tobacco wafted in, a forbidden fragrance that both intoxicated and terrified her. He entered the library, his silhouette framed in the doorway, a dark and imposing figure. Olivia's breath hitched. She couldn't ignore the way her body responded to his presence, the way her skin tingled with awareness. Couldn't sleep? Edward's voice was low, a rumble in the stillness of the room. Olivia shook her head, clutching her book tighter, a flimsy shield against the emotions surging through her. He moved closer, his presence filling the space around her, making it hard to breathe. "You seem troubled, Olivia," he said, his hand reaching out to brush a stray curl from her cheek. She flinched at his touch, but not in fear. It was electric, that touch, igniting a fire in her veins. I'm just tired," she stammered, her voice a mere whisper. It was a lie, and they both knew it. The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken desire, with the weight of their transgression. Olivia closed her eyes, surrendering to the moment, to the forbidden longing that threatened to consume her. The days that followed were a blur of stolen glances and near misses. Olivia found herself drawn to Edward like a moth to a flame, knowing it would ultimately be her undoing. They spoke in hushed tones, their conversations laced with double entendres, their eyes betraying the desires they kept hidden from the world. She saw Mark in him, in the curve of his smile, the way his eyes crinkled at the corners when he laughed. But there was something more, something darker, more dangerous about Edward. He awakened a part of her that she never knew existed, a wildness that both terrified and exhilarated her. Guilt gnawed at her conscience. Mark was her husband, the man she loved, the man who trusted her implicitly, and yet she couldn't seem to pull away from the dangerous game they were playing. Every stolen touch, every whispered word, drew her deeper into the abyss. The storm finally broke a week later. Olivia sat alone in the dining room, the remnants of dinner untouched on the table. The wind howled outside, mirroring the tempest raging within her. Edward entered the room, his hair damp from the rain, his shirt clinging to his muscular frame. He poured them both a glass of wine, the rich ruby liquid sloshing precariously in the crystal goblets. Their fingers brushed as they reached for their glasses, the contact sending a jolt through Olivia. She took a sip, the alcohol burning a path down her throat, loosening the last vestiges of her resistance. "You shouldn't," she whispered, her voice trembling. Edward simply smiled, a slow, predatory smile that sent shivers down her spine. He reached out, his hand cupping her cheek, his thumb gently stroking her lower lip. Olivia leaned into his touch, her eyes closing as the world tilted on its axis. The storm raged outside, thunder echoing their own tumultuous emotions. Olivia lost track of time, of place, of everything but the feel of Edward's hands on her skin, the taste of his lips on hers. It was wrong, so very wrong, and yet, in that moment, it felt inevitable. She had never felt so alive, so free, so utterly consumed by desire. Edward's touch was intoxicating, addictive, erasing all reason, all guilt. There was only this, the two of them, bound together by a shared transgression, a forbidden passion that threatened to burn them both alive. Olivia clung to him, her body trembling, her heart pounding against his chest. In his arms, she found a sense of belonging, a raw, primal connection that transcended the boundaries of right and wrong. For that one night, she allowed herself to forget everything else, to simply exist in the moment, lost in the forbidden embrace of her husband's father. Dawn broke, cold and unforgiving, casting a harsh light on the scene before her. Olivia lay tangled in the sheets, Edward's arm draped possessively across her waist. Shame washed over her, cold and suffocating. What had she done? She extricated herself from his grasp, her movements clumsy and awkward. Looking at Edward now, she saw not the passionate lover of the night before, but a stranger, his face etched with lines of guilt and regret. The weight of their actions pressed down on her, crushing her with its enormity. She dressed quickly, her fingers fumbling with the buttons, her reflection in the mirror a stranger to her own eyes. How could she face Mark, knowing the betrayal she carried within her? The guilt was a physical ache, a heavy stone lodged in her stomach. The days that followed were a blur of feigned normalcy and silent torment. Olivia moved through life like a ghost, haunted by the memory of that night. Every glance, every touch from Mark felt like a brand, a constant reminder of her infidelity. She tried to hate Edward, to blame him for what had happened. But the truth was, she couldn't deny the part she had played, the way she had yielded to temptation, to the forbidden allure of her husband's father. The guilt was a constant companion, whispering poison in her ear, casting a dark shadow over everything. She withdrew from Mark, building walls around her heart, unable to bear the thought of hurting him further. Their once passionate love seemed to wither, suffocated by secrets and lies. The road ahead was uncertain, fraught with pain and regret. Olivia knew there were no easy answers, no quick fixes. The damage had been done, the trust shattered. Whether their marriage could survive this, only time would tell. But as she looked out at the dawn breaking over the horizon, she clung to a sliver of hope. Hope that somehow, someday, she might find a way to forgive herself, to atone for her sins, to rebuild the shattered pieces of her life. The journey would be long, arduous, and filled with pain. But Olivia knew she had to try, for her own sake, and for the fragile hope of a future free from the shadows of that forbidden night.